We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Another exciting episode. Today, I am joined by Mike. Mike, why don't you give us the 30-second spiel of who you are and why we care?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Will. And hello to everybody. My name is Mike Holcomb. I am the fellow for cybersecurity at Fluor. We're one of the world's largest engineering and construction companies. So we build some of the world's largest OT or industrial control system environments. So I also help build and lead that practice as well. So working with our engineers to help them design security into these large industrial environments.
Into the environments themselves. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to kick right off because I remember when I learned about OT security was somewhere around 2018, I think, when I was told to create a security practice for it.
That still happens today to a lot of people. Yeah.
I was in product management and they were like, hey, we're gonna build this security practice around the terminology that our innovation officer told me was like it's like IDS for the shop floor. And I was like, what? I was like, I have manufacturing clients that don't even have IDS in their enterprise environment. And you're telling me they're gonna
Right.
they're gonna put it on the shop floor.
Yeah.
So I guess look at you, Mike. Like how long has this been a thing?
It's formally, I guess it's probably, around, let's see, we're 2025, around 2000, maybe a little bit before you had some of the old school players, which are very few and far between. But I always think of folks like Mike Asante, who's really considered the godfather of OT, ICS, cybersecurity, Jonathan Pillay, Rob Lee, um, quite a few of the Joe Weiss, who founded the original OT cybersecurity conference, I think about probably 25, 30 years ago. So, and the community there was, like 10 people and they would get together and you literally could count them on two hands. And it's great to see though how it has grown, especially over the last couple of years, really since the Colonial Pipeline breach that we saw in 2021. So, but yeah, it's been a thing for decades, but even today, there's still many people that aren't aware of OT, the importance and why we need to secure different plants and sites, especially critical infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember going to that ICS conference in Atlanta. And again, it was the same kind of thing. I was like, what is this going on? I go there and there's all of these products and vendors that I'd never heard of. But it was all, I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is really, and even then I think it was maybe like a day or a day and a half. And there was a pretty decent, it's no RSA or anything like that, but there was quite a lot going on. It was pretty impressive. So to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. That conference is coming up in like 3 weeks, I think. So
that's right. It's October now. So yeah,
Yep.
that's nuts. So, I guess, you do a lot of advocating, evangelizing, educating, whatever you call it, like on OT cybersecurity for people to get in there. I guess, for the first part is what is different about OT security versus regular cybersecurity, and then maybe even the IoT space.
Sure. And I like to say that there's more in common between IT and OT than there's not. Because there are some people in OT or industrial controls that will tell you, IT IT security is not OT security. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but you're sending the wrong message because that just makes it, IT versus OT. And if we're fighting or if we're at each other's throats or if we're not talking to each other, the attackers are winning. And so I like to look at it the other way. And you can consider, I guess, glass half full, but yeah, IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity have much more in common than they don't. Now, there are certain areas where they're different, and they're very different. like vulnerability management. Uh, so it's important to understand where they're different, how they're different, and then to adjust accordingly. I think the big things that you have to remember, especially for folks coming from an IT cybersecurity background like myself, was you need to work with the folks that engineered and designed the plant that understand the physics of how it works. So that's really the difference, right? A lot of Grobley, always mentions, yeah, OT is just IT with physics, right? Because we're controlling things out in the real world. And it doesn't matter if it's a air conditioning unit at your house or apartment, or if it's a power plant. And whether it's traditional or nuclear, the basics, believe it or not, are the same. And how we protect them, the basics are still the same. But yeah, ultimately, it's they have much more in common than they don't, but we do have to remember that they are different, and our number one requirement that we're always focused on in OT is all about safety, right? We wanna make sure that everybody on the site goes home at the end of the day, and that we wanna make sure that, hey, if you're living within, let's say, 10 miles of a petrochemical facility, that no, there's not a mushroom cloud of noxious chemicals that could hurt you or your family. So it's definitely very different from that perspective because it does provide, the services that we all need to live our lives, right? From power and clean water and food on the table, and the list goes on and on.
Right. Yeah, and as somebody who can see 3 Mile Island from my house, I very much appreciate that. So,
Which might be coming back online anytime soon.
yeah, Microsoft bought it, so,
Yeah.
here we go.
Well,
Yeah,
so good luck.
yeah. Jobs, I guess. So with the d like, I love the, there's more in common than and the safety aspect too. Like, when I know when I was talking to, like, leaders in manufacturing, there's kinda 2 angles we took, which was, 1, when you're talking to the enterprise or the I guess not the enterprise side, but the corporate side of the house and on the shop floor and be like, hey, how do you make your money? And then they point to all the machines and you go, okay, what are you doing to protect that? And they go, oh,
Right.
we got to make them
We're
realize
supposed to?
we're supposed to do that. It's air gapped,
Right. Yep.
which is never the reality of it, right? And then the other part, like you said, is making getting a lot of times that's what I would have to do, just literally get the operations people, because they didn't really have, not every manufacturing will have like IT people in there. You get the operations people in the room with the risk people, right, and have them talk
Yeah.
and think about this, because that's
Yeah.
that is um I love the safety aspect, because that's something, like, me as somebody who thinks like a baddie all the time. um, I've had these conversations with people when we kind of talk about operational technologies, and we're like, well, what would you do if you could break into it? And people will be like, well, I'm going to mess with the recipe and put salt in their cookies instead of that.
Right.
Like, and like, well, I'm like, no, I'm going to turn off the safety controls so that I can, that PSI gauge doesn't set off the alarm when it's supposed to. And then I put too much pressure into the machine and start throwing bolts everywhere. And like you said,
Oh,
people get hurt. Like, that's
right.
like terrorism attack kind of stuff. It's a serious,
For sure.
yeah, it's a serious problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's true, and a lot of these can happen. A lot of people just think you're just saying it's like fear and playing off
Mhm.
the uncertainty and doubt, but these types of attacks can occur. Do they happen every single day? No, but we have seen extreme escalation, right? Always increasing since Colonial Pipeline 4 years ago. And because, before then, the I guess I always talk the normal attackers, right?
Mhm.
Anybody that's not a state adversary, right? State adversaries had always been targeting control system environments.
Right.
It wasn't until Colonial Pipeline where the different hacktivists and the ransomware operators and the script kiddies and everybody else realized, oh, hey, we could target this thing called OT and make money, right? Or
Mhm.
if I'm a hacktivist, right, I can get my message out there about my ideology. Um, and so these types of attacks and the impacts that we're seeing are only increasing. Like, we don't have to look any farther than Jaguar Land Rover right now,
Yeah.
where they've had their factories down for now over a month, and they're looking at extending some of those for another month or two. And then I saw a report of indefinitely, and you could already tell they have no clue as to what's going on. And it
Mhm.
was obviously that they didn't have it was very obvious they didn't have any security, or what they did was very little to none. And they obviously didn't have backups, right? Hadn't had a clue on how to recover in the event of an incident. So, and where I get really pissed off is that you now have 100,000 people that are at risk at losing their jobs
Right.
between, JLR and their suppliers, because a lot of their suppliers are like, we have employees that are sitting around doing nothing because they can't make parts because you can't make cars. And a lot of them are talking about going bankrupt and closing
Mm.
their doors. So that's what really, really pisses me off, because you obviously dropping the ball is an understatement of how they were running their cybersecurity program. And now you have all these people that are going to lose their jobs and families without paychecks. And there's just literally no excuse for any of that to happen, because you can master the basics of securing OT, and okay, you're gonna get hit, ransomware comes in, all right, we'll take the average 7 to 10 days to recover if we're at least doing the basics. Again, obviously, they weren't doing the basics.
Right. Yeah, because you need that resilience, right? So you have to assume it's going to happen, and then
Yep,
be able to recover when it does, and understand, whatever that looks like. I mean, and
yep,
it's funny. I do a lot of work with like SMB and mid market also, and that's kind of the approach we take. It's like, well, good disaster recovery, good continuity planning. That can kind of that's kind of your bread and butter, because an event like this can take you out of business, but it's
absolutely.
interesting to see a giant company like this, who clearly, I would say, has the money to spend.
Should have the resources, right? So they have no excuse.
Right.
No excuse. And this is what really pisses me off, because the vast majority of OT environments out there, they don't have the resources. They never will, right? You have some
Mhm.
small mom and pop operator that supplies clean water to 3 mobile home parks in South Carolina, right? They're never going to have somebody doing OT cyber. They're not going to have somebody doing IT cyber. They're not even going to have somebody doing IT. They will just never have those resources. So when you see a company that has those resources do absolutely nothing about it and fail absolutely miserably, yeah, you could tell I'm a little upset with
No,
JLR, but I think rightfully so.
yeah, no, it's frustrating, and it's funny. Like, it's not funny, but I didn't even, I haven't dug into it that much, and thinking about it now, and looking at that, like, I just did a post today or yesterday about getting technical leaders to be able to talk about, um, why you need to do things, why you need to protect parts of the business. And I literally use manufacturing as an example. I'm like, this machine
Yep.
goes down, you're losing $1 a minute. Ransomware is going to take 72 hours. You're out almost 500 grand.
Yeah.
What do you want to do to protect it? Now you've got a company who is not only losing money, but like is potentially, it's amazing that they would go, out of business for it. Right.
Yeah, yeah, some of these, and I think it's still there's a whole story with what's going to happen with JLR and the UK government trying to at
Mm.
least loan them, 1.5 billion at low interest, but yeah, and that's kind of what you're alluding to. Yeah, and you see it on the IT side and you see it in the OT side, that sure, large companies, right, can weather those storms, right? If they recover fast enough, right?
Should.
If most small or medium-sized organizations, that when they take that hit, they declare bankruptcy, they close their doors within 3 to 6 months,
Yeah.
which is very unfortunate to say the least. Especially all because somebody wanted to, instead of doing the right thing and getting a job and earning the money, they wanted to take it from you.
Right. So what are your kind of, um what are your basic blocking and tackling, kind of like, what is the foundation you recommend for those with an OT environment?
Sure. Yeah, my top 5, and this is for everybody, because we can talk about great things like doing risk assessments and network security monitoring, and which are, yes, all required. The problem is it goes back to the vast majority of OT environments will never be able to afford those things.
Hmm.
So I try to say, well, what can everybody use? So I started with, and I actually have the basic acronym, literally BASIC. So backup and recovery. It is very obvious that Jaguar and Land Rover, right? They don't have backups of all their systems. Otherwise, they would have been up and running by now, right? Period. Period. Dude. It just blows my mind, right? So making sure we're backing everything up, right? We're testing those backups. We keep them secure, right? It's just like in IT. The only one exception is, when you're backing up systems. Now we have OT systems like PLCs and uh, HMIs, and so you
Hmm.
want to also make sure that you not only are you backing up the code running on those, but you back up or at least have a copy, a good copy of the firmware, the specific version that was running on that box with that logic, with that programming. So when you go to restore, okay, this firmware, this logic, I'm up and running, right? And that's why it's the first control. No, it's not fancy, but you know what? If you get popped, and everybody's going to get popped in OT, just like in IT, then you can restore regardless. Again, obviously not happening with Jaguar. There's a lot of companies that get in trouble where, yeah, they can't restore. And then they have to bring in somebody that retired 20 years ago and that can't remember how, right, they actually run the systems and how they were programmed. So backup and recovery. Then we talk about asset management is huge. And in OT, and a lot of that is because not it only is it that, yeah, you need to understand what's in the environment, but it's this basis for so much other different aspects of OT cyber. So everything from incident response, right? If I call Dragos in because we're having an incident for help, they're going to be like, well, give us your asset register so we can really quickly understand what's in the environment, right? Or your SOC team, right? If they get an alert, they see IP address to IP address. Well, if they don't know what those IP addresses are, how are they going to know how to respond, or if they even need to respond, right? Vulnerability management, right? We need to understand, right? What do we have, right? The equipment we have, the systems, from what vendors, what versions of firmware, right? So we can track down, do we have any vulnerabilities, hardware, software, firmware in the environment? So asset management plays a big key part. It is the least sexy, right? It is the most boring part of OT cyber, but it is one of, if not the most important pieces that we have. And then we talk about secure network architecture. So that way, at a minimum, we have that firewall between IT and OT. I wonder, what happened at JLR, because it's almost like there was no firewall between
Hmm.
JLR, or if there was, between their IT network and the manufacturing plants, then you probably had permit IP any, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
the access control list, which we see all the time. And it's amazing. I go into a lot of sites that, I mean, there could be, and this is my side consulting, not even, in my day job, but the side consulting where they have 100 sites spread out across the country or the world, and it's still this one big flat network. And then they wonder, well, we had this one plant go down because of ransomware. It's like,
Now every plant's going.
right? Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it hasn't been worse. And so secure network architecture, just at least even start between breaking up IT and OT, and then you further segment OT down further
Mhm.
because it's going to slow down the attacker. Once they get into the environment, it's going to limit the blast radius if something bad happens from a cyber perspective. So yeah, secure network architecture used to be my number one, but even at the end of the day, it's like sites just need to be able to restore, their machines when they go down. Because even worst case, you're probably just going to have a machine that just goes on the fritz, and you're
Yeah.
going to need to replace it anyways. So
Not even an event, just a thing that happens. Yeah.
exactly. And then do incident response planning, not incident response, but incident response planning. So, who do we call? And then, when we have an issue, if we have a firewall between IT and OT, can we disconnect it safely without causing safety issues or production issues? Do we even know where to go in the data center and which cable to pull,
Mhm.
those types of things? And then I also get into, yeah, you mentioned manufacturing. If you're in manufacturing, like JLR is a perfect example. Right? If you're in manufacturing, um, that you definitely need to be watching at least for news items, maybe not all of the OT ICS space, but at least other manufacturers, right? I
Little
actually have
threat
one
intel.
client. What's that?
A little threat intel at least, right? Yeah.
Right, and you're not paid for it, and it goes a long way. Because I have one large client that's, a car parts manufacturer. They do not have to look any further, right, than what's going on with JLR right now. Now, we don't have a lot of details, right, of what's going on, but if any of those details ever come on, you don't even need the details in some respect to just ask the questions, "Hey, can this happen to us? And how
Mhm.
we can how can we prevent this from happening to us?" If companies were doing that, then we would have been able to prevent so many different incidents over time. But they're not. So,
Mhm.
and then the last one is continuous vulnerability management. So just making sure we understand where the vulnerabilities are, making sure that we're talking with the engineers and the people that run the plant that understand the physics of the environment and say, hey, we have this vulnerability on this one system in this one part of the network. It controls this part of the process of what we're running or what we're building or what we provide to the public. What would happen if an attacker was able to exploit this? And I always love actually having these conversations because a lot of times the engineers, they're just like, well, it's kind of the old, well,
Yeah.
nobody would ever do that. And
Yeah.
then you try to,
Yep.
then you get them to, okay, put on your evil thinking, hacker hat. And then it's actually fun to watch them. And, some of these people are really, they're absolutely brilliant. I work with some triple PhDs in my day job. And so you get some pretty crazy conversations pretty quickly. But, at the end of the day, it's understanding, working with the people that can tell you what is the impact. Because does it impact safety?
Mhm.
Does it impact the operational availability of the plant? If it doesn't impact either of those, we will probably never do anything about it. Like, because that's all we really care about, right? Making sure the plan's running and most importantly, make sure everybody's safe.
True.
So they're
Yeah, I talk a
saying,
lot about in manufacturing and OT, the CIA triad's upside down because A
right,
is availability is the most important thing, and what you're saying there from vulnerability management, like, I like to think that, like, I'm always talking about context in all of vulnerability management, right? Okay, this vulnerability is really, really bad, but how likely is it really going to be? Like, does it has to be like somebody with specific access and it has to be in a document of this type and on a server like this. So I think in OT that's even more important. Like you said, if it's not, it may be really, really bad, but if the probability of getting to it's, a fraction of a percent, then we're not going to shut down the system and patch it, right?
exactly. And that's where we have this now, next, never
Mhm.
approached in OT. So if it does impact safety, that's a now, right? We need to take care of it. If it's could it impact availability, that could be a now or more than, hey, that's going to be a next, so next maintenance window.
Mhm.
Now, depending on the environment, that might be 2 or 3 years down the road.
Right.
Uh, So that depends. So it might seem like you're never going to do anything about it, but and then if it doesn't impact either, then that's where you get to never. Dragos does a lot of really good work around understanding vulnerabilities in the OT space, and they release numbers in their year in review report every year, and they talk that it's like 70% of vulnerabilities you'll never do anything with
Right.
them, right? But you still have to have those conversations, right, with the engineers and the plant operators to understand, is this something we need to do to take care of or not. I'm not in a position to make that decision. I
Yeah.
can make an educated guess, but I don't want educated guesses coming into play when we're talking about safety or the availability of. And in some of our environments that I work in, I mean, you could lose $100 million a day from an
Yeah.
outage. That's obviously not not something. There's not enough
Not something you wanna
liability
sign the dotted
insurance.
line for.
Right, exactly.
Well, and that's something I talk about a lot too, like, just, all of us in cybersecurity professionals, all up to the CISO, it's not really our job to make the decision. It's our job to assess the risk, present it to the people who own that decision and go, "Hey, here's your what could happen. Here's what it might cost, and here's what it costs to fix it. What do you want to do? And they're signing off on it, not us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Mike, this was great, man. I could keep talking to you forever, but I won't. So for those who want to find you out on the interwebs, where can they go?
Yeah, the best place is usually MikeHolcomb.com, HOLCOMB.com. That has links to all my stuff. I'm always on LinkedIn, so you can just look for me there. The bald Mike Holcomb. There's a couple others, of us out there, but I am the / Mike Holcomb on LinkedIn, and then my YouTube channel for folks that want to check out my courses is Utilsec, UTILSEC, so like utility security. Or just Mike Holcomb, we'll pull it up. I have a 25 plus hour free getting started in OT/ICS cybersecurity course. I have an OSINT course for OT, which is about 10 hours. And then I'm currently releasing 2 courses at the same time. I don't know how the heck that happened, but one for OT pen testing. So,
Nice.
And then one for 62443, which is the kind of the gold standard in how you build a program for OT cybersecurity. So
Nice. That's great, Mike. Well, hey, dude, thanks so much for your time, bud.
yeah, thanks, Will. Definitely. I appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.